Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. A new year can mean new plans, new goals, and new challenges, especially when it comes to money, be it rent, a mortgage, groceries, gas. Many people in BC are feeling a pinch and looking for some relief. What are your top financial priorities in 2024? And in our second half hour, you may have some personal resolutions for the new year. What do you want to accomplish, and what are you willing to let go? An award-winning BC author will join us to offer a more balanced way of living and being creative. I'm Dan Burritt, in for Michelle Eliot. Welcome to BC Today. And thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming on CBC Gems, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. We are now officially into a new year, but many of us are carrying worries about money with us from last year. How do we pay higher rent, higher mortgage perhaps, groceries and other essentials? And if there is money left over, what should we do with it? We want to hear from you now. What are your financial priorities for 2024? What are your strategies for dealing with financial challenges? Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950 across BC, 604-669-3733 in Metro Vancouver, pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Maybe you had a thrifty holiday season. Maybe you overindulged a bit, as one is wont to do on occasion, and maybe you're dreading those credit card bills. No matter what the state of your finances is, we could all use a little advice. Joining us now are two financial experts to help with that. Mark Kalinowski is financial educator with the Credit Counseling Society in Calgary and Southern Alberta. And Mark Ting is On the Coast's financial columnist and a partner with Foundation Wealth. Hello, Marks, to both of you. We really appreciate you being here. Mark Kalinowski, I'm going to start with you. The cost of living increased dramatically for many Canadians in 2023. What are the main pressures for people entering the new year? Hello, Mark, can you hear us? You might not be able to hear us. That's okay. I'm going to pivot to Mark Ting. Mark, busy year for you, I would imagine. What are some of the financial pressures and perhaps goals that you're hearing from your clients and customers heading into 2024? Still having a bit of trouble hearing from either Marks. We're going to get to them again. I want to repeat the numbers for you. Give us a call right now if you have a financial goal, if you have a financial worry that you would like to deal with. And we'll throw those numbers up on the screen right now. 1-800-825-5950 is the number across BC. In Metro Vancouver, the number is 604-669-3733. You can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. And again, pound 690 on your cell phone. Please be hands-free or pull over if you're going to give us a call. Let's check in with either Mark Kalinowski or Mark Ting and see if they can hear us. Gentlemen, can you hear us now?
Absolutely can. It's Mark Kalinowski.
There we are. Thanks very much, Marks. Glad we were able to clear that up. Mark in Calgary, I'm going to start with you. Busy year for a lot of people, an expensive year, a more expensive year for a lot of people. What were some of the main pressures that you heard from people that you help heading into the new year?
It was a really interesting year last year. And what we saw was that people had gone from sort of a state of being, upset, wanting to deal with their debt to a point where they're almost just feeling like they're out of options. Their mortgage has gone up by hundreds, in some cases thousands of dollars. Of course, the cost of food has risen, the cost of transportation has risen. People are getting to the point where they really don't know where they're going to pick and choose to find money to just keep making life work.
Is that any different from in past years?
In past years, I'd say that we've always had that segment of clients that have been, sort of upset. But I'm actually sort of getting to the point where we're seeing desperation amongst some people, where we've actually changed some of the things we've done, where we've gone to some standby counseling. So when someone really has that need, they can get through to someone right away and start talking to people, because that takes a lot of stress away right away.
So you've had to increase your staff or your availability?
We've adjusted our availability, so we have those people that are available. It used to be about a week out. You call, you set an appointment, people will talk to you in about a week. And now we have those people that are online waiting to help people as best we can.
And what sort of demand, once you've been offering that more immediate service, what sort of demand did you see?
The uptake has been substantial. People feel this burden on their shoulders, in their chests, and they need to find some place to let it go, to know that they're not alone, to know that it's going to be all right, that there's options out there and there's ways to make the situation better.
When you talk to people who reach out for help, how many of them are aware that there are options as far as they're being offered?
Honestly, I was a senior banker here in town for a long time, and when people came in and said, "I can't pay you, Mark," I'd say, "Oh, you're bankrupt." But the truth of the matter is that's not the only option out there. And when you sit down with an accredited counselor, they're going to take you probably through 6, 7, 8 legitimate ways people go to address debt, often starting with those simple things right up front. Let's look at your budget, your spending, what can you sell, all the way down. And then we talk about those bankruptcy options for those people that it's appropriate for.
Mm-hmm. Now, analysts are saying that inflation has slowed, and we have seen some evidence of that. The Canadian economy hasn't slipped into recession yet. There were some rumblings of that perhaps on the edge. What are you looking for this year?
We're hoping for some relief, and relief will come when interest rates start to go down a little bit. That'll make life more manageable for those people looking to renew their mortgages or looking to, refinance into something more affordable, of course. I'm also hoping that the cost of things generally level out a little bit. I personally feel this in my own household. I have a giant 310-pound kid who's going to play football next year. I'm struggling to feed him. Like, he eats nonstop, and the cost of a frozen pizza went from $3 to $7 at some point. I'm hoping it levels out.
Yeah. And are there some, I guess, overall themes or more specific themes that you hear from people that are perhaps maybe not on the super desperate side, but thinking, oh my goodness, where am I going to get some help here?
We do hear those themes. Many people have seen the rise of inflation, but they haven't really felt their incomes go up to match. It's been one of those times where a lot of organizations are still recovering from COVID, getting back on their feet, but costs keep going up. And I think we're getting over that hump where maybe we'll start catching up a little bit and people will feel a little bit better.
What is your financial situation at the moment across BC? Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950. The number in Metro Vancouver, 604-669-3733. You can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca, and you can call us on your cell phone, pound 690 on your cell. Please be pulled over or hands-free when you do that. What are some of the cost pressures that you're feeling heading into the new year? Have you found some solutions that are working for you? We'd like to hear from you. Mark Ting, I want to bring you into this discussion right now. For those people who are able to, perhaps, depending on how much money they have, maybe it's a little or a lot, what are some of the ways people can, for example, maximize RRSP contributions this year? We know that deadline's coming up.
Yeah, the RSP questions always comes back to their tax bracket. So typically people think that, okay, I should always do RSPs. It's always a good thing to do. And I generally say that that's not the case. Often you have a lot of options for that money. So you can choose RSPs, which would reduce your taxable income. Typically, that conversation starts with people who make about $60,000 or more. If you fall below those thresholds, there's tax-free savings accounts. There's the new FHSA. And of course, what we're hearing about nowadays a lot because of the interest rates going up, and if people have mortgages, a lot of people are thinking of the opportunity costs of putting money into an RSP, getting a tax deduction, like saving for the long term, or if they have a renewal coming up, maybe taking that extra money, paying down their mortgage and seeing if that makes more sense. So it's a lot more discussions. There's a lot more involved in just saying that this option is better than another option.
And remind us, the FHSA, what is that again?
Oh, sorry. That's the First Home Savings Account. So it's kind of like a hybrid of a tax-free savings account in that if you put money into it, it will grow tax-free. And when you take it out, it will be tax-free, but only for the purpose of buying a home. But it also has the tax deductibility aspect of an RRSP. So there's quite a few nuances to it. There's rules in terms of when you have to buy your house and who can apply for it. But it's something new that's just come on the scene in the last year. So a lot of people have a lot of questions about it.
I asked this question of our colleague Mark Kalinowski, who's joining us from Calgary. What are some of the major themes you hear from people that are coming to you asking about what they ought to do with their financial situation heading into this new year, particularly as we saw many people get squeezed last year?
So generally the questions I get this time of year is bring out your crystal ball. What's going to happen for next year? Is the stock market a best place to invest? There's all these things that are scary out there. We got wars, we got inflation, we have beliefs that the interest rates are coming down, and I would say most economists think that's going to happen. What if something happens where that doesn't happen and inflation stays higher for longer? So there's all these unknowns that are out there, and you throw in a US election, and a lot of people are very confused. So what I generally tell them is, like, forecasting, it's literally a flip of a coin. Like, if I were to go back this time last year, most people were saying that we would see a recession in the US and Canada, interest rates would be down already. And of course, none of that happens. No one predicted a pandemic in 2020. No one predicted, a war. So all these things sort of happen. So what I generally say is the best course of action, if you have a long-term plan, the thing that I really like doing, and I do myself, is the dollar cost averaging. So you make a certain amount into your RSPs, if that's the best place for the money, and you just do it no matter what happens. Because issues, the unknowns, they happen every single year, yet stock markets tend to go up over the long term. And we find out that most individual investors, because they're buying and selling at the wrong time, they don't partake in the same upswings as the markets. So it's best to have sort of a strategy where you take the emotions out of it and you're just buying constantly every single month for the same amount of time, same amounts at the same time every month. And that's a strategy that's been proven. It works well, and it just really benefits from that compound interest, which is really the miracle of long-term investing.
We know over the next 2 years, more than 2.2 million Canadian households are going to have to renew their mortgages. What advice do you have for people over the next year?
For me, I basically tell them to talk to their mortgage brokers. So I stay in contact with my mortgage broker quite often. I did have a couple renewals that happened over the last couple of years, and I do have some coming up in the future. The way I structure it is, again, it's a little bit of a timing. I would say that most mortgage brokers right now are sort of suggesting a variable rate mortgage if you're up for renewal or you're getting a new one. And that's basically on the belief that interest rates will come down. Now, the mortgage rates and renewals, again, it's not as simple as it used to be. It's not just about rates. It depends if they're insured, if it's for a revenue property. There's so many things that are involved in there. I got a mortgage broker, or I suggest anybody who's dealing with a mortgage broker that has the financial tools, and a lot of them don't. They have the financial tools where they can make predictions and assumptions. And I've actually spent at least an hour with my mortgage broker going over various different financial assumptions, and then sort of landing on the mortgage product that I ended up taking.
And Mark, for people who may not deal a lot with their mortgage broker or trying to get one, remind us, is that a free service? How does it work?
Typically, it's a free service. I mean, the first thing you don't want to do is you get a letter in the mail from your lender and they say, hey, you're up for renewal. Here's the rate. Sign here and we're good. That's generally a first volley. And the lender's hoping that you accept that. And those terms aren't usually very good. At that point, it's a little bit different. So now there's stress tests involved. You might have to stay with that lender, but you definitely want a more in-depth conversation. In terms of mortgage brokers, typically the lender pays them. It's not the client. So you could go to a mortgage broker and explain your situation. The mortgage broker will sort of explain how they get compensated and whether it makes sense. Because of the stress tests, often the mortgage broker will say you're actually stuck with the lender that you're currently with. It doesn't make sense to break. But yeah, typically the client does not pay the mortgage broker. It is the lender.
Right. Okay. That's good advice. We appreciate that. We do have some calls coming in. We're going to get to those in just a moment. Mark Kalinowski, I do want to go back to you. When you're receiving calls, are they how is there a breakdown between people who are renting and people who are dealing with higher mortgage rates?
Well, they do suffer from different situations, of course.
Correct.
However, what we've generally seen is that rent has gone up as mortgage rates have gone up. And I actually had a good friend of mine sit down with me at a bar. He was a little stressed out. He goes, Mark, I'm getting to the point where I think I should just sell my house and rent. And I looked at him and I said, you know, you got 2 kids, you're going to need a place like this. It's not good. There's going to be no difference between what you're paying in rent and what you're paying in terms of a mortgage right now. I don't know that that's necessarily the best course of action. And what I reminded him was what's really important is to go back to your budget and figure out what you really have to have in life, what's important to you, what you have to spend, and then give up some of that stuff that you don't need. And in our house, we've given up subscription services, for example. I don't drink coffee out and about anymore unless it's actually a coffee date with someone. And it sounds trite, but we've also given up things like new cars. Both my wife and I, and we have nice secure incomes and a nice life, but we drive old cars because that's a lot of money going down the drain. And when we think about our budgets, when we think about tracking, when we think about our mortgage payments, for example, you know, I know interest rates are really important to people, but one of the big things I encourage people to remember is that it's most important that you can sleep at night with that mortgage you have. And honestly, my first mortgage was at 5.85%. And my dad came out of a place where mortgages were 20%. And he said, Mark, if you can get it at 5.85, lock in forever. It's never going to get better than that. And I've always paid 2 or 3% more than my friends, but I've always been able to sleep at night. So that's what I encourage people to do. Life is good when you know you can get to the next month.
Right. Of course, in that context, your father and similar to parents that of various generations, they may have been dealing with higher interest rates, but the amount that they were borrowing was much smaller for a lot of people.
True, substantially less, but I come from a time where my mom was a stay-at-home mom and my parents had 5 kids. While the house may have been less expensive, there were other expenses and other income considerations at the time. So I don't belittle anyone's situation. Like I understand these people have big mortgages, but you know, if we really go and we look at our numbers carefully and make really good value choices based on what we want in life, I think we can work through this brief but difficult time and get back to a place where we're comfortable.
I want to put some listener comments to you. Ross contacted us from Hope. He says in 2017, he sold his house in Langley, moved to Hope debt-free with no payments. He says that because he's at that point, he would like interest rates to stay high for his investments. We'd like to hear your perspective on this. Mark Ting, I'd like to put that to you first. What do you make of what Ross did and what he's advocating for?
Sorry, I actually missed the question. So he sold his place in Langley, moved to Hope, and then what was the second part? He's
debt-free. He says at this point, he would like interest rates to stay high for his investments.
Oh, okay. So investments, that's an interesting one. So what I'm getting from him is by investments, he's talking about cash in the bank. Because savers want high interest rates, and they're high right now. You can get a high interest savings account between 3 to 5%. Or you can get bonds for longer for, you know, around the same amount. But interest rates in terms of almost everything else, real estate, stocks, bonds, everybody in sort of my game who's thinking long-term, we want interest rates to come down because interest rates that come down, they're very good for bond prices and they're generally a tailwind for stocks. So me personally, I want interest rates to go down because I own, real estate, stocks, bonds. But for the cash savers, I get that. Interest rates do look great, like almost a risk-free at 5% or 4 to 5%. But you also have to think about it that typically interest rates are generally lower than inflation. So while it looks like your money is going up in value, and after inflation dollars, it likely isn't. So you probably, in that situation, you probably want to have some money in cash. But depending on the age, if you think you're going to be living more than 4 or 5 years, you probably want to diversify into other investments as well.
Ian from Kelowna contacted us to say he says it bothers him to hear about how high interest rates are now when there were higher rates in the 70s and 80s at a time when only one person in the family was working. Not always the case, but certainly perhaps more typical back then. What would the difference be between then and now? Mark Kalinowski, you touched on this earlier. Why don't you pick up on that one?
I can't tell you exactly what the difference was, but I can understand why my dad would come home and look angry and be very, very stressed out having, 5 kids to feed, struggling with a 20% interest rate on a house, and knowing that there was no backup in terms of another income coming in. So there's definitely stress there. The truth of the matter is, though, when your money's not working for you, whether it's because there's 2 people in the house working, 1 person, things just start costing more, there's unhappiness. I mean, a lot of what we're measured by in society is our money working, and look at what good stewards we are, and when it's not going the way we want, we really feel like everyone's judging us. And the truth is, And I've learned this in a whole bunch of areas of my life. No one's looking at you. Everyone's busy looking at what they're own doing. And what I'd encourage people to do is if they feel a sense of hopelessness, like they don't know how they're going to make it work, or they just need a little bit of help, they want some encouragement. Well, that's when you reach out to a nonprofit organization and say, hey, can you go through this with me to make sure I'm doing those right things?
Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to that, we've heard this before, that there is a certain stigma around people who feel as though they should have a handle on their money, that it ought not to be a problem. But various factors come into play, and Mark Ting, you touched on this earlier about all of these pressures that come around. Mark Kolonowski, first to you, how do you cut out the idea of that people people feel ashamed?
It's tough not to feel how you feel. And I would never ask someone to say to not feel how they're feeling, but I would encourage people to really understand what the root of the cause is. And when we see people come in and sit down with our counselors, and I spent 5 years counseling, it was almost never someone coming in saying, hey, I blew a wad at Vegas. It was always someone coming in saying, hey, I lost a job, someone got sick, someone died. In this case, what we're seeing is the economy's gone in a direction that we weren't told about, we weren't made aware of. We didn't think this was going to happen. Everyone said interest rates were going to stay low forever. Well, we're not all experts on the economy. It's not your fault. We should all try and make ourselves aware, but we're not experts. There's so much in life we don't control. And I'd encourage you, the way you lose shame is you talk about it. You find someone you can trust to talk about it. That could be a minister, that could be your spouse, that could be someone at a nonprofit who listen and say, it's okay.
Do you ever get people calling back telling you that they've had some success, that things have turned around, and thank you for that?
You'd be amazed at the things people will come back and tell us. I personally have had at least 2 people who said, if I hadn't talked to you that day, I was driving off a bridge. I'd had it. That's me personally. I can't talk about the other counselors,
right?
But they've been in that position, and I've seen people do the strangest things. They just tweak a little thing in their budget, life works. I've seen people do extraordinary things. They sell their Harley Davidson because they want to put their kid through school. They figured out how to pay for it, but maybe they just never thought of it before. So asking for help's okay. And I think when you have great financial professionals, whether it's your banker, your financial planner, credit counselor, who put your interests really at the forefront, you can get where you want to be a lot quicker by asking for that little bit of help.
And hopefully avoid what sound like some pretty desperate situations, as you mentioned, Mark. Now, if anybody's in that position, this is a number we like to give out when we talk about issues around mental health. 310-6789 is for mental health support anywhere in BC. You do not need an area code. That number again, 310-6789. We're coming up to the top, or the bottom of the hour, I should say. We'll be wrapping up in just a few moments. Mark Ting, I want to go back to you. You mentioned bonds and a few other things. What are some of the major trends, let's say, if you have between 1 and 3, that you would direct people to in the coming year?
So I would say even before you start thinking about investing in the stock market or long-term, financial planning, sort of going back to what Mark was saying, the most important thing to me is paying off long-term debt, high interest debt, and having an emergency fund. If you have those 2 things, you're ahead of the game, because if something happens, you lose a job, unexpected expense, you're not going into credit, you have that emergency fund, you can pay for it, and then you can refund it. If you have those things covered, then start talking about investing long-term. Then we'll have all these discussions about where to put the money, TFSA, RSPs, tax ramifications, and then you would probably want to talk to an expert or a financial advisor or someone. If no one will talk to you, this is sort of the trick that I generally say to people, because sometimes you don't have access to a very good financial advisor. Go around your circle, talk to your parents, an uncle, and someone who does have someone they can recommend. And often they can make an introduction. It doesn't mean that that financial advisor will take you on as a client, but they might take you on and just give you an hour of their time and sort of give you sort of a high level observation of what you could be doing for your status in life.
And remind us, you mentioned mortgage brokers generally are come at no cost, at least up front. What about a bank?
The bank mortgage brokers or financial advisors?
Or both?
It's sort of different. Financial advisors are a little bit different. There's fee for service. There's some charge commissions, some charge trailer fees. So definitely get that information up front of how that professional is getting paid. You shouldn't even have to ask. If they don't tell you how they're getting paid, I would probably steer clear of that person. Bankers, in terms of their mortgage parts, they probably get paid by the bank, or some of them are commission based. Again, you'd want to clarify how that works, but also realize that if someone works for a bank or a credit union, they have a limited shelf. They can only offer their own products. So that might be sort of a detriment.
All right. We're going to wrap it up there, gentlemen. We really appreciate your time. Mark Ting, On the Coast financial columnist and partner with Foundation Wealth, and Mark Kalinowski, financial educator with the Credit Counseling Society in Calgary in Southern Alberta. We really appreciate your time and your expertise. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Bye-bye.
Coming up in our second half hour, from money to mindfulness, finance to perhaps feelings. What do you want to accomplish personally this new year? Are there things you want to let go? We're going to speak with award-winning author Chelene Knight after this news break with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. There's still no word on a cause of a fire in Surrey yesterday that left one person dead. It broke out in a home along 26th Avenue just before 7 in the morning. Investigators say at this point there's no indication the fire was suspicious. The latest housing assessment figures show residential property prices in BC have stabilized. The assessed value of a single-family home here in Vancouver rose 4% to just above $2.2 million. Strata properties remain nearly unchanged at a little more than $800,000. And before the day is over, most of Canada's 100 highest paid CEOs will already have earned what most Canadians will make all year. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives says those CEOs, who are mostly men, broke records with their compensation in 2022. Their average pay was nearly $15 million a year. That works out to more than $7,100 an hour. And now the forecast on the north coast, mainly cloudy and windy this afternoon with a high of 7. Highs to -7 with a mix of sun and cloud in the Peace. In the central interior, mainly cloudy with a high of -2. Highs to 0 and cloudy in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, mainly cloudy with a high of +1. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, periods of rain this afternoon, windy in some areas with highs around 7. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Dan with BC Today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zimmerman. Happy New Year to you.
Thanks, Dan. You too.
And thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming on CBC Gym, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Hello to everyone in Braylorne listening at 1350 AM, and good day to our listeners in Kispiox at 91.3 FM. So, it is the second day of a new year. If you made a resolution or 4 over the past 2 days, how do they sound now? Attainable? Realistic? What do you want out of this new year personally? We talked about finances earlier, but maybe there's something else that's driving you. What if there's a better way to change up our thinking around self-improvement? Give us a call now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733 is our number in Metro Vancouver, pound 690 on your cell phone. Please be hands-free or pulled over, and email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Award-winning BC author Chelene Knight joins us now with her brand new book. It's called Let It Go, Free Yourself from Old Beliefs and Find a New Path to Joy. Chelene, thanks for coming in. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you, Dan.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
So your books, we've chatted with you before on all sorts of shows. Multiple awards. You had the debut memoir, Dear Current Occupant, won the Vancouver Book Award. And your last book, Junie, which we chatted about a number of months ago, shortlisted for the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction. What made you decide to go in the direction of a guidebook for people who are creative or want to be creative, maybe?
Yes, that's such a great question. I feel like every book that I've ever written, there's always been this thread of love and joy. And I thought it time to really address that directly. And so this book was my opportunity to explore my own path to joy, but also kind of open it up a little bit and ask myself, how can I write a book in a way that's going to call people in and have them look at their own history or their own definitions of joy. So that's my reason, my purpose for writing it.
Before we get more into the book, would you share with us more about that path that you took and how you were able to take what you learned and put it in the book?
Yeah, I felt this deep connection to the seasons. And so when I discovered that could be a shape or a container for the book, I really just ran with that. So I spent a lot of my time writing the book in summer, tucking it away, pulling it back out in the fall, and really paying attention to how I was different based on the season. And so the book kind of took that shape, and it follows the seasons, but it also asks its readers to look at how they see themselves depending on the season and to really follow that thread. And at the end of the season, we are dropping things off. We are letting go. And we're not doing that passively. We're doing that, again, through this idea of language and what it really means for you to let something go and why you want to let it go.
What did you find in terms of a transition between summer and, let's say, fall and winter? And as we look outside, we know we see a lot of rain. There's a lot of gray. How did that influence what you let go and kept?
Yeah, I think it's more about my personality. So in the fall and winter, I'm kind of this quiet, hibernating kind of a person. And come summer, I'm a very different Chelene. I'm a different creative, a different person, and I'm out there being a little bit more vocal, a little bit more bold. So my writing kind of followed that shape, which was really interesting for me to see. So again, I just really followed that and let that path kind of outline itself instead of trying to hide it or tuck it away.
Did you find you felt physically different as well when the seasons changed? You go from perhaps being more outgoing in summer where there's warmth and perhaps near the water to the cozier feeling in the winter?
I would say so. Yeah. I would say so. It's interesting how that happens. I think that's partly due to slowing down and paying attention. So all of us, we feel this pressure to hurry up, finish this, do that, move on to the next thing. And this book really encourages folks to slow down. Pay attention to the world around you. Pay attention to yourself. How do you feel in this moment? What's different? What can I drop off? What's holding me back? So definitely.
Who is this book aimed at?
Very good question. I think when I'm writing, I'm always writing for a past version of myself, a younger me, but younger me isn't going to buy the book. So I have to stretch that out. And of course, I feel like with this book, I'm always speaking to other Black creatives, but again, broadening that lens. Is there a person out there who has been stuck inside of joy and not being able to define that for themselves or not being able to find an entry point? I want this book to be that entry point and for folks to say, hey, wait a minute, this is for me. Joy might be for me. And I don't have to wait for the world to be healed in order to, slow down and really call in joy. So I think because the world is always crumbling around us, this all the more reason why we need to make space for joy.
What are some of the common hurdles you found to finding joy? And whether or not a person is Black, what can they take from perhaps, are there some commonalities when it comes to finding joy?
Yeah, I think it's definitely connected to, I guess, that desire to rush and hurry up, and also saying yes to things that we don't want to say yes to. That is the biggest thing. Like, how many of us have said yes to a project or a person or even just an event or something that we didn't really want to do? We said yes to it, we're in it, and our energy is depleted, right? So this book also shows you how to manage your energy better by saying no with love. And I feel like that is my core message, is to teach people how to say no with love and better manage their energy.
How long did it take you to learn how to do that?
I'm still learning. Okay. I'm still figuring it out.
So I'm not the only one.
I'm not done. Okay. No.
Yeah, it takes a while.
It takes a while, for sure.
I think we have a call on the line. Sabina is joining us from Victoria. Sabina, thanks for calling BC today. What would you like to share?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Yes, you're on my Bluetooth. I'm on my way to the passport office as we're speaking, and you're on my Bluetooth. Just wanted to share, you mentioned about how do we look at New Year's resolutions in a positive light, and that is exactly has been my objective for this year, because last few years being in COVID and looking after elderly parents, one of whom has passed now, but my one-word ambition for my New Year's resolution is travel. So my thought process on this is that we've often, New Year's resolution has been sort of used as a bit of seems like a punishment. It's like, we have gained weight, so we must lose the weight this year. But the way to look at it and is to be positive, like to put a spin on it that is positive. So something you can look forward to and be happy about. So that is my one-word resolution for the year. And I'm planning to travel to Costa Rica on an active adventure. I'm in my 50s, so I'm excited about doing that for next month. So that was my little two cents on the matter.
More than 2 cents there, Sabina. We really appreciate your call, and our best to you and to your family on the passing of one of your parents. We know that there has been a lot of loss for a lot of people over the past number of years, and I'm going to ask Chelene about that. We're going to invite your calls again. 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733 is our number in Metro Vancouver. You can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca, or give us a call, pound 690 on your cell phone like Sabina did. Thankfully, please be hands-free or pulled over. When it comes to loss, as we've been talking about, as mentioned, and what Sabina was dealing with, certainly we've had a lot of that over the past 3 years. In the depths of the pandemic, we lost a lot of people. What is it in your book that perhaps, is there something about letting go of past trauma or dealing with it?
Yeah, letting go of different ways of managing grief or carrying grief, I should say. So often we are holding on to things in a way that we've always done, but we've never looked at that and said, well, is this still working for me? What aspect of what I'm doing, how I'm managing this grief, what isn't working for me anymore? So again, slowing down, paying attention to that and asking yourself, well, who am I today? And how is that different based on this grief that I'm holding? If I let go of this old way, this tradition maybe that I've held on to, what would that mean for me moving forward and moving into joy? So it's really just a reflective book, a reflective ask. I think this book is to look at yourself and be willing to pay attention to what you see, even if it's not a good thing and you don't like it. We have control over how we show up, essentially.
That can be hard, though, when tradition, perhaps
Yes.
family pressures, perhaps religion, keep people from exploring other avenues, and maybe they're scared to do that. So how do you confront perhaps a fear?
Yes, I think that's a big thing. And a lot of it, I think, connects to just being open to having conversations with people around you. So who are you calling in? Who's your support system? Who's your circle? Who's in that circle? What does community look like for you? So for me, it's often just redefining things. So I might look at my language and say, this is what I've been taught, but here's where it brought me. So I tend to work backwards from that and start unraveling things. So when you have family and you have traditions and you've got these kind of ingrained beliefs, it is so difficult to unlearn that. But I think we have to be kind to ourselves and know we have to do that work, slowly. We can't just drop something off and think we're good. We have to be open to just slowly unpacking and paying attention, looking at it. But, making sure you've got people around you who really support you and who are open to sharing their resources with you as well.
Did you find in this book that you were able to tap into those people that are your support network in different ways? And I guess, because that can be perhaps not an awkward process, but a difficult process for the people around you, if perhaps there's still heritage, religion, tradition that you think you've decided to let go of, and they're wondering about what you're doing with it.
Yeah, I think you have to prime the people around you. You have to say, hey, this is the journey I am on. Here's what I'm doing for myself, and here's why it's important to me. And here's what I need from you. So again, open communication and communicating that. But in the book, I actually speak with 10 other Black leaders. And I've called them in to ask what their definition of joy is and how do they use joy or navigate joy in moments of difficulty. And those are the moments that have filled the book. So it's my experiences, but also the experiences of these other Black leaders. And I think that's what makes it such a robust book. It's not just about me. Hey, lots of good people in there.
You've brought in a whole network of
brought in
smart
my
people.
Community.
Excellent.
Yes.
We have David on the line in Kitsilano. David, Happy New Year. What do you make of New Year's resolutions, etc.?
Yeah, thanks so much. I was just looking at joy in my life, and I came back from a very short vacation, and some water had dripped out of my fridge and had ruined my kitchen floor. So Anyway, it's hard to be at moments of full joy, full-on joy. But I have a pretty good life. What I was going to say about your guest's work is she hit on something that I've been practicing for. I thought I'd practiced for quite a while, but it seems like just the last couple of years, and that is playing only with those who want to play with me. That's been my guideline, because being someone that really wanted to be liked and cared about and all that kind of stuff, I was working really hard at getting that and getting those people around me. Now I see them showing up because I'm starting to recognize, they like to play with me. So respond, David. So that's what I do. Mm-hmm. And that means saying no sometimes. Not just in a confrontive, no, I don't want to do that. And occasionally, but not that often. I just, I'm not really ghosting them either, being able to say, I'd rather not do that, rather than, just leave that with me. Mm.
So you're polite about it.
Yeah, I try to be still. I still want to be liked. Come on.
David, I did see in the notes our producer put in here kindly that you worked as a therapist. Is that right?
I worked as an addiction counselor. Yep, that was one of the things I did for a while.
And
yep.
How did that help inform you around protecting yourself and learning to say no?
It was a real exercise, because I went into that. I hate to admit it, I went in with a bit of an edge in life, and as a working as a addiction counselor, I found that didn't work out that much. So I had to kind of back off and just listen to people. And one of them actually had said, I just want to have people around me that I like. And I think that was the lesson I learned in that. My wife was also a very, very qualified therapist, and I learned a lot from her too. And she wants to play with me. So
that's great, David. Thanks so much for calling us from Kitsilano in Vancouver. We really appreciate your perspective. It sounds as if interesting, obviously, Chelene Knight, the work that people do will inform how they handle letting things go, saying no, saying yes to other things. What did you make of what David said?
Yeah, it seemed to me like David was saying no with love. That's exactly what it is. It's not a passive no. It's not an intrusive no. It's no, but it's rooted in something. There's a pillar that David was leaning on, which is he knows what's important to him and how he wants to show up and who he wants in his life and the kinds of things he wants to do with those people. And if that doesn't align, it's a very clear no. So then it's also like you don't feel that guilt. You know how when you say no to something, you're like, I just want to drop this off. Like it doesn't feel good. But when your no is rooted in something that is aligned with you, those guilty feelings are gone.
Do you think we're getting better at that over the past couple of years? Maybe because people had to say no because they couldn't go out because of the pandemic and a whole bunch of other things? That's
what I was going to say. It's the pandemic that kind of opened that door where folks kind of realized what's possible. So we don't have to do something a particular way. What can happen if some of us are working from home and we have some flexibility? What does it look like in terms of the output and the productivity and the work that's coming out of that? So folks are open to that now. So I think the possibilities have now broadened and people are curious. And that curiosity is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I think we've definitely gotten better.
Joanne writes us, my resolution for this new year is to create healthy habits that are attainable and manageable. Keep it simple. Good advice, Joanne. Resolutions, though, we've talked about people not making them, but then making goals and keeping it simple. Do you talk about that at all?
I do. I talk a little bit about that in the book, but language is very important to me, so you will not find the word resolutions anywhere in this book, I promise you. I talk a lot about priorities and aligning your priorities. So I have a workshop called the Say No with Love workshop, and at the end of that workshop, you walk away with a map that helps you, pay close attention to your priorities, know how you want to show up that season, and have your lens or thread to kind of help guide you. So it's pretty cool, but I think resolutions, we just need a new way to look at this because they seem firm and hard and scary and not fun. But what if we open that up and build a new language around what that means for us?
We have Neil calling us from Penticton. Happy New Year, Neil. How are you doing with either resolutions or priorities or goals for the new year?
Not too bad, I guess. It's been a bit of a rough last year. It's not so much a resolution that I was calling in regards to, but I'm trying to look at it like one. My father passed away about a year ago in December of 2022, and the past year has been me setting up a resolution, or pardon me, resolution to show some to do a tribute to him. I'm kind of stumbling over my words here.
It's okay.
I'm doing I've been planning to do a pilgrimage through around the island of Shikoku. It's a 1,600 kilometer walk to 88 Buddhist temples, and it was something that it was actually a bucket list item that my father at the end kind of it forced me to do in honoring of him, and it's something that I wanted to do, but the last year has been more so about helping other people deal with the grief, and this has been kind of what I've been waiting for, moving toward for myself, for my grieving process. And, I was reading a book, I think it was Thomas Harding, called Swallowing the Snake or something, about how men tend to grieve a little bit differently than others. And so this is something that I've been waiting for a long time, and as it's approaching now in March, it's finally coming up, and there's a little bit of apprehension, but it also is feeling like something that has been that needs to happen as a way of, not necessarily moving on, but just doing something that is a tribute and also for healing as well.
So this
that would be something interesting.
Yeah, and so this is something physical that you're doing, this pilgrimage. Where do you hope it goes, perhaps on an emotional, spiritual level?
It's kind of funny. I actually wanted to do it at the tail end of last year because it was it's actually the worst time to do it in off season, so to speak. It's that because it's the hardship that part of me was kind of wanting. You want a physical manifestation of how you're feeling inside. And unfortunately, with family, it actually is going to be at the best time of year, but that's because of spring break. So we're going to be taking the kids are going to be going off to visit some in-laws while I take off solo to do this pilgrimage. But it's very much the sense of the walk, and like I'm not a Buddhist, but I do understand a little bit about it. It's more so about having that experience, that time by yourself to reflect, and actually having a goal, because you can sit at home all you want, but actually having to get up and having to move and do something. Some people tend to, maybe they'll take up woodworking or build something, and I'm a bit of all thumbs when it comes to that, but I can walk, for now at least. Yeah. And now is a good time to do it, I think.
Neil, we really appreciate your call, and again, our best to you and your family, and please stay safe on your hike. I saw you nodding along there, Chelene, talking about something, the process that he's going to be going through. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and I think it feels to me, or it sounded to me like that was a very specific and unique process to him, and I think that's the key. Make it work for you, make the adjustments or changes where needed. So if you've got this process, maybe you inherited from someone, take some pieces out if they don't work for you. It doesn't have to be a full overhaul, but again, grief is so different for so many of us, and finding a way that feels good for you to navigate that, I'm all for it.
Interesting that the two calls that we've had so far about this have been dealing with grief and saying goodbye to parents. Do you address that at all in your book?
A little bit. I talk more about changing the ways in which we communicate with family. And so again, sometimes the letting go is soft. It's not a full goodbye.
Right.
It might just be, I need to change the way we hold space together. And I think that's a beautiful, soft way to do it, where you're not removing people from your life. You're saying, here's where I am today, here's where you are, I recognize that, and here's how we can kind of be in the space together. So that might be another approach as well.
Was there anything that surprised you? You said you spoke with 10 local Black leaders. Anything surprise you from what they shared with you?
Yeah, I actually spoke with folks all over North America, which was super cool. But what surprised me is when I was in conversation with these people, and I'm a planner, I'm organized, so I had all my questions ready to go. But the more the conversations kind of gained momentum, I threw my questions out. And we were just having a conversation. It was like two friends in the space. And so that feeling, that conversational feel, that vibe is definitely in the book, which I hope makes it accessible and approachable as well.
And with those leaders, and we've heard from people who've lost, we didn't know what Sabina, the parent, but is it open to, do you think that people of all races, ethnicities, and sexes will be able to take something out of this?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I hope so. I hope so. I've definitely written it in a way that speaks to a lot of different people. You will notice moments where I am speaking to a very specific person, a very specific audience, but I only do that briefly. And then I zoom the lens back out. And that's very intentional. I pay attention to shape in terms of how I write and construct books.
For somebody, and we're just approaching the end of our time here, really appreciate your time, Chelene. For somebody who is looking to dive into this, what do you think they ought to be prepared for?
Be prepared to go deep, to go inward. I always say that the letting go is not something you often address directly. It becomes, it's actually a byproduct of the work that you do on yourself. So the more that you work on yourself, the more that you experience personal growth, the more these things that no longer fit in your life are going to start to raise their hand. And your mindset's going to be different. And you're going to approach that in a way that feels like, hey, I actually want to address this instead of this kind of, here's another thing I got to work on. So I say be prepared for that. A lot of things that you've been carrying around, they're out of here.
Is it going to be a little scary?
It will be.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And do you have any advice for people who might feel a bit scared?
Yes. You should definitely check out my website because I have all kinds of resources. So I do a lot of coaching. Again, I have workshops. I work not only with writers and creatives, but also busy professionals who are trying to tackle it all. So that's my advice.
We really appreciate your advice and your insight. Chelene Knight, the new book is called Let It Go, Free Yourself from Old Beliefs and Find a Path to Joy. And remind us, where can someone get it? Yeah,
always support your local indie bookshops, but you can get this anywhere. You can get it on Indigo, Chapters.
Wonderful.
Amazon.
Author Chelene Knight, thank you so much for joining us. All the best in the new year.
Thank you so much.
And that is it for our show today. Thank you very much for joining us. You can listen to the show again on the CBC Listen app and watch us on demand on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Thank you to everybody who called and emailed and listened and watched. We really appreciate it. I'm Dan Burwood in for Michelle Eliot today. Thank you for listening and watching. Let's chat tomorrow.